Welcome to our last week of the Story, Gifts, Passion, Purpose series. It's been good. We wrap up today with purpose. And again, this is our desire not to have a formula, not to figure out the thing we got to do, but to pay attention. Right, so this has hopefully helped you pay attention and form maybe a little bit more how you pay attention to your own life and to the Spirit. And again, we're asking these two fundamental questions. What is God doing? And what am I doing about it? How am I responding? COVID isolated us, and there are, I believe, and maybe you'll agree, some residual habits we exhibit that continue to isolate us. Sometimes in an effort to, quote unquote, make up for lost time, we scramble, right, to do all the things and maybe not pay well enough attention to the world around us. But talking about purpose in church and other Christian circles can have a real seriousness, right? Or a finality to it that often leaves many of us feeling like we still aren't doing what we're, quote unquote, supposed to be doing. Maybe you haven't felt that way, but for those of you who have, I want to name how discouraging it can be to feel that way. And to remind you that there's another way to approach this. So when it comes to purpose, we often hear verses that, end up being cross-stitched nicely on a pillow or plastered on some giant poster with an eagle on it or something like, I don't know. And they're great verses. Like, I don't diminish the verses, but they all too often stand alone and outside of their context and we can end up feeling like we just missed the boat. But verses like Ephesians 2:10, right? So we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. And this is true. But we sometimes get a little too everything is predestined about it, and purpose can become misunderstood, and then so does God, and then our relationship with God. And we are God's handiwork. We are created in Christ Jesus to do good work. And God has purpose for us. But it's not necessarily singular. Right? This is about a life of good works. In fact, in the English, the phrase for us to do, like good works for us to do, is actually in the Greek translated as that we should walk in them, or how we conduct our life, or how we do everything. Your purpose is how you do everything. Maybe you're familiar with the quote. I think it's attributed to Martha Beck. I know there's probably lots of people who have said this, but how you do anything is how you do everything. It's every little thing. It's a life of purpose. It's sometimes also things like jobs and other callings, but at the heart of all of this is how we pay attention to God and neighbor on a consistent basis. Your purpose is about God's purposes in the world, and living faithfully into your day-to-day can reveal purpose. There's this great story of a woman in Acts 9. If you are reading along, you can open up to Acts chapter 9, and this is verses 36 through 43. Reads like this. In Joppa, which is modern-day Tel Aviv, there was a disciple named Tabitha. In Greek, her name is Dorcas. Side note, this makes it really hard to tell this story to junior hires. Her name is Tabitha. Her Greek name is Dorcas. She was always doing good and helping the poor. First thing we hear about her. About that time, she became sick and she died. And her body was washed ceremonially and then placed in an upstairs room. Lydda, another town, was near Joppa. So when the disciples heard that Peter was in Lydda, they sent 2 men to him and urged him, "Please come at once." So Peter went with them. And when he arrived, he was taken upstairs to the room. All the widows stood around him, crying and showing him the robes and other clothing that Dorcas had made while she was still with them. And then Peter sends them all out of the room. And he gets down on his knees and he prays. Turning toward the dead woman, he said, "Tabitha, get up." She opened her eyes, and seeing Peter, she sat up. He took her by the hand and he helped her to her feet. Then he called for the believers, especially the widows, and presented her to them alive. This became known all over Joppa, obviously, and many people believed in the Lord. And Peter stayed in Joppa for some time with a tanner named Simon. Okay, couple of things. She has 2 names. She is known by 2 names. She is known by her Hebrew name, which is Tabitha or Tabitha, and she's known by her Greek name, Dorcas. She has 2 names because she is important to both groups. She is important to the Jewish people and to the Greeks. She was one of those who was, she represented both ethnicities. She was one who could tie and bind all the people together. She did good for anyone and everyone. She was a safe and gracious and beloved person for both the Hebrews and the Greeks. She was well known and well loved by 2 sides that were trying to work things out in this new church together. So talk about having the right person to be part of the early church. Right? A church filled with 2 majorly different ethnic and cultural groups. This, I believe, is one of the reasons why she's brought back to life. So when Peter prayed over her, he told her, "Tabitha, get up." And this verb, get up, in the Greek, it's in the aorist imperative active tense. And you don't need to remember all that nerdy stuff. It just means that it's a command. And it means he's essentially telling Dorcas, you have got to get up. Girl, we need you. She was a widow, and she helped other widows. And if you know anything about the plight of widows in this time in history and much more, they are often left very vulnerable and alone. Right? If you're a woman in this time and in this place and your husband dies, you usually go then to your family or to a brother-in-law or something, and you are cared for because society doesn't allow you to take care of yourself. Right? They don't have independence. They needed to be married. But she does it differently. Okay, she creates a strong and tight-knit community of widows, of support, of activity, of belonging. And this group makes a name for themselves. This group of widows, not relying on, having to go marry again or live with their sister or their brother-in-law or whatever, or be remarried. Like, no, we are independent women. And we can have a life together, a life where we can do some good and have purpose. She was a giver. She was a seamstress, and she made clothes for those who struggled to afford them. And uh, she empowered these other women, right? These widows in her community to live out a life of purpose by busying themselves for the sake of others. They're like, what are we good at? We're seamstresses. That is a harder word to say than any of us think. Uh, they can make clothing, and they themselves, they are, in their own story, right? They are shaped by what they've experienced, their story, their widowhood. It shaped who they became, and then what they did. And they owned their story, and then they led with their gifts, and then became passionate about vulnerable people around them. Right? They know what it feels like to be vulnerable. And she and the widows and the poor, they in so doing, in so letting this story and this gift work out into this passion, right? She became a change agent by how she did everything. Right? She brought people together from across the aisle. We know that she has a Hebrew name and a Greek name, right? And then we know that she's experienced vulnerability. So she creates a community of stability with other vulnerable people so that they together, not alone, together can be strong and independent and live with some wonderful purpose, helping other vulnerable people. And it's beautiful. She creates community out of those who were once vulnerable. She makes clothing with these other women and makes clothing accessible. And she brought two majorly different groups across cultural divides together. Dorcas rules. She is one of easily my two favorite people in the Bible, other than Jesus. But how she decided to live her life became so purposeful. When I was in my first call in ministry, I served as a youth pastor. And within the first few months, we had this large youth event we went to out of state. And the students I was with, these high school students, were just really like fired up, right? And wanted to do something good. And as we were talking, they talked about this ministry that had been started a few years back, and then kind of laid low. And once it was run by some other students who had graduated, and then as they graduated, right, the ministry that they were doing went away. This happens, right? And so here's how the ministry started. This ministry was, 16, 17-year-old kids who would, on a Sunday, they would, after church, they would pack these lunches, brown bag it, put them in these backpacks. They would take the light rail, Minneapolis. They would take the public transportation downtown and bring their longboards, and they would skate around the city and find people who needed a meal. Just super thoughtful, super intentional. This is the best part. Because they were on skateboards, and they were like, what do we call this? And they decided to call it, this is his acronym name, was SHWAP. And it stood for shredding, skateboard term, shredding with a purpose. It was so cool. So the kids, they're like, man, we should do that again. That was so good. And I was like, okay, let's do it. Now now everybody was on skateboards, but the church had this had a small bus, and I had a bus license at the time. And I was like, well, what if we made a bunch of lunches? Let's make like 100, and then pack them up and bring something to drink, whatever. And then we can put it all on the bus, and we can put tables on there, and we can bring it down There's a particular neighborhood where there's a Salvation Army Harbor Light location where it was both long term housing and then some emergency housing. All right, so the kind of folks showing up all the time. I said, well, why don't we help out and bring some food? And we did that. And we said, let's do it once a month. And we started doing it once a month. And we called it 25-35 off of Matthew 25-35. Or what when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. And it's great. And so we continue to do this. And it's me, maybe a couple of parents, and these students. And we're going downtown once a month and doing this. And one parent starts to come, and I don't know how the parents felt about it at first, and I think they're like, "Oh, this is cool, but where are you taking our kids?" And which is fair. And one mom starts coming, and she starts coming like all the time, and she seems to really enjoy it. And I don't know where she started at first. So she was like, "Oh, what are we doing?" But she starts coming and she starts getting involved, and then she starts to get ideas, right? And she's like, "What if we brought some coats? What if we do a coat drive and hand out coats for free for people in Minneapolis?" Which, if you don't know, it's very cold in the winter. She's like, "What if we did that?" I was like, "That's a great idea. Let's do it." So we hold a coat drive, and we get tons of coats, and we bring them down, and we put on all these tables, and people are grabbing coats for the winter. And then she gets more ideas. She's like, "What if we did a backpack drive?" Because people down there, a lot of them have backpacks, and that's kind of all that they have, and a lot of them need new backpacks. So we did backpack drives, and then we did toiletry kits, and we went to hotels and motels around where the church was, and we asked for like those little, shampoos and soaps and all that stuff. And we started to make these care packages. And the more she was involved, the more like filled out the ministry became. And, all of a sudden we were like, we started doing clothing. And then we would have like table after table after table of free clothing. It would be coats, it'd be socks, it'd be sweatshirts, it'd be backpacks. We just had all this stuff. We just like set up free shop on the street. And then had lunch. And it gets to a point where I'm like, man, this is becoming quite a large ministry with a lot of need. And I'm kind of like running out of time to do the youth ministry too. Like there's just so much I'm holding, trying to keep this going. And I'm like, man, I gotta something needs to change for me, right? And then I sense the Spirit say, ask this mom if she will take it over. And so I do. I say, hey, look, you've been involved in here. You have some great ideas. You seem to have a lot of energy and passion about being here. And this is a creative outlet of ministry for you. And I think you should take it over. And she was shocked by that. But she prayed. And within short order, she's like, "Yeah, I'll do that. This is great. I would love to." Right. And then so she starts getting all these other people involved, and her husband starts driving his truck down and loading tables up. And she goes, all these ideas, and it's like booming. It's fantastic. And then here's the other part of the story, that we were in a church where we had a school renting space. And it was a fairly large church. So we had all these classrooms, and somewhat abruptly, the school ended its contract being in the school in our church, and then they were gone. And we're like, oh my gosh, well, financially that was a bit scary, but then it was also like, well, what are you going to do with all this room? And in short time, this mom was like, I have this dream, this vision that we would open all these rooms back up, and it would all be a free clothing closet. I was like, that is a fantastic idea. What do you need to get that done? Right. So then she starts talking, and she starts talking to leadership, and everyone's like, yeah, this is a great idea. And she begins developing with others this free clothing closet. It's called the Closet of Hope. It's still running today. Um, and there are like classroom after classroom after classroom in this old large library, and filled with clothing, toys for kids, toiletries there's a whole closet of toiletries people can just have. And there's back to school drives, and they bring Santa in in Christmas time, and they kids get pictures with Santa, and they get a gift, and um excuse me, and they she got people, these other guys involved, and she's like, hey, I need you to make some changing rooms. So these guys made these changing rooms. And it is like they are never without clothing and things to give away. She also got hooked up with like Walmart, and was getting grants, and was getting opened packages of clothing. Like, people like rip open a bag of socks and they can't resell it. Well, they just give it to her, and then she would just give those socks away. She got hooked up with, we were in near the Mall of America, and every, like, I don't know, 6-8 weeks or something, they have all this lost and found that nobody ever claims, and you'd be surprised how much new stuff is there. And she found out about this, and they like look to give this stuff away, because like we cannot store this, right? So they give it to her, and like there's been like brand new like North Face fleeces. It's incredible. Like, it's not bottom stuff. It's good stuff, and good quality winter gear for people. All right, so they do this once a month. So they've now moved from doing it downtown to doing it in-house in this like second ring suburb, where they help a lot of actually brand new like immigrant families, right, who've come to Minnesota, and they're like, we do not have much, right, or we do not have winter gear, we need some help. And they have people who help translate for newcomers who come, and their English isn't so great. They have activities for kids, and they get like in the hundreds of people in a month. And they just run this once a month, right? And then I think they make some appointments too. But either way, they've served like thousands of people, thousands of guests who can just come and fill their bags with clothes and stuff for their kids and toiletries. It is incredible. It's been going on for like over 10 years, right? And there are so many people involved, because there is so much purpose here. Now, and I want to say, like, this is not her job. She should get paid, but this is only volunteer, right? This is all volunteer work. She works like a regular 40-hour-a-week job. This is her passion, and this has become her purpose, and she's helped make it other people's purpose. It's so good. I'm like so blessed just knowing her. She let her heart be changed and full, and she was able to see like what God you are doing, and what am I going to do about it. And here she is, and here they all are, doing this wonderful ministry. So as I wrap up, I want to name how we understand our occupation, right? Because so many of us struggle thinking, oh, like my job doesn't have purpose, right? Or I'm just fill in the blank. What good is that for society or the kingdom? Right. But can we move away, right? Especially in light of this story, move away from the idea that our occupation, our job, our 9 to 5 is what our purpose is. No. You are part of the kingdom of God, and your purpose within that, right? However that looks in this season or the next, that's your purpose. So how we understand occupation, right? Or the word occupy, right? The word occupy means to hold territory or fill the space. How do you fill the space? How do you fill the space you are in? Right? True purpose is fulfilling, like fulfilling, where all things are filled, you and others, where you thrive because your story, your gifts, your passion have led you here. Right? Because true purpose, like true gifts, they don't just involve you, it involves others. It benefits others and glorifies God. So here are my questions as I close. What's in front of you? Who is around you? What do you notice? What is God up to? What's your next step? Grace and peace.